Welcome to our Farm and Trust Centre at Welney. My name's Graham and I'm on the wardens here, and I should do the swan feed for you. But unfortunately at the moment, as you can see, we're a bit short of swans at the moment, but hopefully a few more from the bank will come over later on when I put the corn out. One of the reasons that Welney is so important for the swans is because we have two habitats effectively. We have this lovely open area of water in front of us where they will spend the nights roosting, and we are surrounded by this very fertile arable farmland where they spend their days gleaning a living from the wastage from the agricultural production. And this includes sugar beet tops, waste potatoes and any corn they can glean. And early in the year, or early in the spring, they'll also be feeding on the farmers growing corn. Now, you might think this will put us at odds with the farmers, but the swans are actually only really after the growing tips of the corn. This is where all the nutrients are. So only graze it quite lightly. And in the springtime, when it actually starts growing again, the corn does what we call tiller, and it pushes up 3 or 4 new shoots instead of the original one. The farmer's actually benefiting from the swans lightly grazing this crop. In fact, 60, 70, 80 years ago, they would employ flying flocks of sheep to do exactly the same job, so we have flying flocks of swans instead now. The problem comes if we get very, very wet weather. You can imagine sort of several thousand deep feet plodding around in the corn crop doesn't do it too much good, so we hope for drier weather or frost, so do the farmers. But anyway, back to the swans. We have 3 species here. You probably all recognise the mute swan. There are several on the bank there, preening. Very characteristic carrot orange bill with the black markings. And they're what we call indigenous. They breed here, they live here all year round. And by comparison to our 2 migratory species, they're rather lazy. They only sort of fly 50 miles within their territory. Now, the 2 swans we get excited about here are the migratory swans. And these are the hooper swans and the Buick swans. Now, there are a few hoopers out here, and these are the swans with the yellow bills. And I think there are a few Buicks scattered amongst those on the bank there. But to tell the difference between the 2 species, you really have to look at the bill markings. I mean, the hooper is slightly bigger than the Buick by about 2 or 3 kilos, but the distinguishing marks are actually on the bill. If you look at the profile of the bill of the hooper swans down here, if you can see any, there's one just splashing around having a bath at the moment. If you look at that in profile, you see that the bill marking, or the yellow marking, comes to quite a distinct point towards the tip of the bill, forming almost like a wedge shape. So we call this the hooper's wedge of cheese to help us remember, because the Buick swan has much more black on the bill. It's like somebody's taken a paintbrush and added a little bit of yellow either side of the top of the bill. And so we call this the Buick's dab of butter. So it's butter for Buicks and wedges for hoopers. Now, as I say, these birds are migratory, and the hooper swans will have spent their summer months up in Iceland, northern Iceland, where they breed. They have a migration of something like 1,200 miles to get to us here at Welney in the UK. But if you know your geography, you'll know that there's no significant landfall between the coast of Iceland and the coast of Scotland. This entails that the birds undertake a 800-mile non-stop flight from Iceland to Scotland. There's no point in them coming down because they can't sort of rest or feed up to build their strength up again, so they try and do this in one go. And quite incredibly, they can do this in 12 hours and 40 minutes. And it's quite staggering. I mean, it's an average speed of 60 miles an hour. It's such a big bird, it's quite incredible. What I find really amazing is the juveniles seeing this. And you can tell them they're pretty well comfortably a few coming down to feed, but they've got slightly ashen grey plumage and they haven't got the distinct yellow markings on the bill yet. When those juveniles made that journey, they were 3 to 3.5 months old. So for a bird at that age to undertake this journey really is quite incredible. Now, the Buick swans actually breed up in northern Russia, Siberia, and they have a migration of 2,500 miles. But their journey isn't quite so arduous because they come down through the Baltic states, through Poland, Germany, and then on to the Netherlands. And depending on the weather and how mild it is, quite often a good number of the Buick swans will actually stop in the Netherlands. They like to feast on the old tulip bulbs, I expect, and they won't come down here to the UK until the cold weather forces them as far south. And as I say, we have good numbers of both species. Currently, I think we've got about 3,000 hoopers and about 2,000 Buick swans on the reserve. Now, when Sir Peter Scott was first studying the Buick swans back in the 60s, he came to realise that the bill markings for each swan was individual to that swan, as your comfort is to you. So he set himself the task of actually recording these in sketches and drawings so he could recognise birds when they returned from their breeding. And this was the start of our research working for the Buick swans. Now, unfortunately, we can't all draw as well as Peter Scott, so we cheat these days. We use what we call Darvik rings. And there's a swan just stood on the bank, or 2 swans stood on the bank, this is preening, and you can see bright yellow rings on their legs. Now, one's on the left leg, one's on the right leg, and that's because one's female and one's male. Right leg for the male, if I remember rightly, and left leg for the female. So those are how we record the individual identities of the swans these days. They've got 3 digits on them, and if you look at your left-hand side, you see a strange structure made out of hoops covered in netting, and that's what we call a swan pipe, and that's where we actually catch some of these swans to fit these rings. Now, just before I go out there to feed the bird, I'll just talk about 1 or 2 of these ducks out here. You obviously all recognise the mallard, I expect. Most common duck in Northern Europe. You can't mistake the drakes with their lovely bottle green heads. Again, they're indigenous here, they live here all year round, they breed here. But at this time of year, their numbers are bolstered by migratory birds from as far afield again as Russia as it gets colder. Now, there is one tufted duck out there I can see. I'll use this dive just to prove you wrong. They're little tufted ducks, you can't mistake them, just the male, very decorative little gentleman in a black and white suit. This nice little tuft on his head, hence the name. But there is one out there. Just come up again, directly in front of me with the white sides. You can see. You get quite a few of those here, but the most common duck out here is these little diving ducks called pochards. Now they breed up in Siberia again, and these males are lovely, distinct plumage with their lovely red heads and red eyes and silverbacks. But there's very few females out there. If you look out there, the females are much drabber, as in all duck species. And that's because we only have a small number of females here. The ratio of males to females here is 10 to 1. We have 10 males for every 1 female. And the reason behind this is because the females have decided to go and spend their winter in the Mediterranean. They're all in southern Spain. One of my colleagues says it's because they can't read maps, but it's not true. It's a terrible joke, I know, I shouldn't say it really, it's very un-PC. But the reason behind this is that, so they breed up in the tundra in Russia, and these brightly coloured males, if they sit on the eggs or to look after the chicks in any way, will be a magnet for every Arctic fox in the district. So they only have one function to perform in the mating game, and that's the obvious one. And once that's performed, they will actually start drifting south on their migration back to the wintering grounds. So by the time the females actually rear the youngsters and start their migration, all of the most northerly sites suitable for wintering are taken by big packs of male ducks, which forces the females to fly a bit further south to find somewhere suitable to winter. So that's why we only have a few females here.